13 years ago, Michael threw a copy of the divorce papers at me and said, "I've sold the house because I'm moving in with her." At that time, I couldn't quite grasp what he meant. "So, Emily, the divorce is already final. Just take Kevin and get out already," he told me. Those words have stayed with me. I was surprised by Kevin's words when he returned from a job interview at a company. I asked the HR interviewer, "Does your company condone affairs?" The smile that spread across his face was unlike anything I'd seen before. Apparently, the interviewer denied it. So I continued, "That's strange. Then why are you sitting there?" Indeed, the interviewer was my ex-husband, Michael. "My name is Emily, I'm 48 years old. I work at a call center for an insurance company. It's just Kevin and me in the family. We were abandoned by Michael 13 years ago. I met Michael when I was 20. I had just graduated high school and got a job as an office worker at a subsidiary of a pharmaceutical company. That's when I met Michael, who was 27 at the time and had been transferred from the main office. He seemed interested in me for some reason and started asking me out to dinner. I had just become old enough to drink. I was definitely thrilled to be asked out by an elite from the main office. After a few such occasions, we started dating and I ended up pregnant. I was shaken. I thought he would be angry and break up with me. But then, Michael proposed marriage. When we went to greet my parents, he even told my father, who was still alive at the time, "I'll make your daughter happy." Back then, marriages due to pregnancy weren't seen very positively, so we had a simple ceremony. Eventually, our son Kevin was born. Michael returned to working at the main office, and I followed him, becoming a full-time homemaker. From then on, I devoted myself to taking care of the home. When Kevin started elementary school, we bought a house with some help from Michael's family. I thought I was living a happy life. But I was turning a blind eye to the fact that Michael was coming home less and less as Kevin grew older. Having married at the young age of 20, I had no idea what a normal married life was like. I didn't even question not knowing Michael's colleagues or superiors. In retrospect, there were plenty of signs leading to our divorce. And then, on Kevin's 14th birthday, Michael left us with these words: "I've already filed for divorce and sold the house, so get out." I went from a happy 35-year-old homemaker to a single mother with a 14-year-old son overnight. When I returned to my parents' home without any notice, my brother and his wife were cold to me. By that time, my father had passed away, and the house belonged to my brother and his wife. My mother, who was around 60 at the time, was overshadowed by my strong-willed sister-in-law and my blunt nieces. Amidst all this, Kevin and I were told, "You can stay for a bit, but find a job and move out soon." Back then, I couldn't think of any job I could do immediately. A high school graduate office worker with no special skills. But still, I had to make it work somehow for me and my son, Kevin. I devoured job listings, searching for something that would pay enough to support my growing boy and me. I was lucky, though. Kevin was 14. They say it's a tough age, but he had enough sense. Much better than a mother with a baby to care for. I jumped into a call center job at an insurance company. My experience in office work helped with handling phone calls. At first, I was a contract employee, but after a few years, I managed to become a full-time employee. It was an unknown world at first, and I was exhausted both mentally and physically. But as I continued working, I realized something. How little I knew when I got divorced. I was a high school grad, and my family wasn't highly educated. That wasn't everything, but my ignorance was one reason why I ended up in financial trouble after the divorce. It was a divorce caused by infidelity. I should have demanded alimony and child support from my husband, Michael, but the thought never occurred to me. My mother and brother were the same. Well, if my brother had cared even a little, he might have suggested something, anything, from his acquaintances, but he didn't. It was only after I joined the insurance company and learned new things that I realized I had been treated unfairly. But by then, too much time had passed. That's why I wanted Kevin to go as far in his education as he wished. Knowledge and wisdom can save you. I didn't want him to end up like me. Now, 13 years later, my job, salary, and life are stable. Kevin got into a prestigious science university and even made it to the doctoral program. As a mother, it was surprising. And he even said he'd manage the tuition himself. How, in the midst of his busy studies? He found some non-repayable scholarships and secured them for himself. I just had to sign the parents section. 4 years in university, 5 in grad school. He excelled and even got scouted by various companies. Like the saying goes, a bulk hen lays white eggs. Kevin's future must be bright. But sometimes, I'm reminded of that day. The day Michael left me. It still swirls darkly in my mind. It was so sudden. Michael came home, faced me and Kevin, and tossed a crumpled piece of paper at us. It was a copy of the divorce papers. I didn't remember signing them. But my name was written on it in handwriting similar to mine. When I asked what he meant, Michael said, "I've sold the house because I'm moving in with her." I couldn't understand what he meant. The divorce was completely out of the blue for me. "So, Emily, the divorce is already final. Just take Kevin and leave." He threatened not to be lenient if we didn't leave within 3 days. I was 35 at the time, having been just a homemaker for 14 years. I didn't know what to do and headed to my parents' house. Michael's voice still rings in my ears. Maybe I should forget it. After all, Kevin and I are living a fairly settled life now. It's not lingering attachment. It's frustration at my past helplessness and resentment towards Michael. Now I know I could do something about it. Then one lazy weekend, when I decided to sleep in, my phone's ringtone echoed. The number on the screen wasn't registered, so I decided to ignore it and went back to bed. But the call kept coming, breaking and resuming. Eventually, I heard a voice from the voicemail. It was my ex-mother-in-law. Repeating, "Please let me speak to your son." I wondered what she meant, but I decided not to answer directly. Later in the evening, Kevin returned home in a suit. When I mentioned the call, he burst into laughter, so she did come after all. He laughed so hard, shaking and banging on the table, tears in his eyes. "Kevin, what have you done?" "It's a job interview at the company today, right? I told you that, didn't I?" "Liar! Tell your mother the truth." "It's not exactly a lie," Kevin began, explaining what had happened that day. The interview was indeed a fact. He had been scouted by a pharmaceutical company he'd been in contact with for some time. But the problem was the company itself. The pharmaceutical company he mentioned was the same one where I used to work as an office clerk in a subsidiary. "Ah, it's not a coincidence," Kevin said casually. "By the way, the HR manager who conducted the interview was Michael Smith." "What did you say?" "Funny thing is, this guy had no idea I was his son." "You realized it?" "Of course. After all, I didn't need such an interview in the first place." "Why?" "This company came scouting for me, so there was no need for an interview." "But as HR manager, he must have seen your resume, right?" "He must have. But my appearance has changed a lot since middle school, right? Hairstyle, vibe, all that." "Well, that's true. 13 years is a long time. Plus, I doubt he even remembered my face from back then." Now that he mentioned it, that was true. I had been so absorbed in my own thoughts, forgetting that Kevin had also become distant from Michael. More importantly, seeing my current address and academic background, even with the same name, he wouldn't realize I'm his son. That might be true. 13 years ago, in his second year of middle school, Kevin had been, at best, slightly above average in his class. But after our divorce and his transfer to a new school, he began studying unusually hard. His grades suddenly shot to the top. He went to a high school that matched his academic performance, maintaining nearly the top spot in the science classes. Then he attended a prestigious national university. Recommended by a professor in his third year, he went straight through 5 years of graduate school. From his master's to his doctorate, achieving significant accomplishments in complex fields that I didn't quite understand. The scouting was due to these achievements. desired by several companies in the chemical and physical sciences. In other words, I was the one choosing them. Kevin said nonchalantly. That's why I asked for the interview. I had researched and knew he was the HR manager. I was surprised at his initiative. But he didn't change his expression even when he saw me. The interview was standard. Except Kevin had more questions to ask. So I asked the interviewer, "Does your company condone infidelity?" His face then lit up with a smile I had never seen before. And what did he reply, this HR manager? "Of course, it's not ethically acceptable," he said. Hilarious, right? So I continued, "That's strange. Then why are you here?" His face instantly froze. Kevin couldn't stop laughing. Then, thankfully, the executive next to him asked me what I meant by that. That's when I pulled this out. He said, showing a crumpled piece of paper. It was a copy of the divorce papers Michael had thrown at me. This is a copy of the divorce papers my mother was tricked into submitting by this man. What does your company think of this? You kept that copy all this time. I thought I had thrown it away. In fact, I was sure I had. I didn't want to see it. I thought I had to throw everything away and leave. Yeah, I picked it up after you threw it away. That's why it's all wrinkled like this, kept in a clear file. I thought it should never be lost. Why? Because this is evidence of what he did to you and of forging a private document. Oh! That's not all. There's forgery of private documents, and, well, other things. Plus, the divorce papers themselves were invalid at that time, so if he married another woman, it would be bigamy. Bigamy? I'm not an expert, so I asked a friend from the law department at university about it, whether this could be a crime. A crime? Yeah. A clear crime. So I told them right there, isn't this forgery of a private document? I gave a copy of the copy to the executive. I see. The original of the copy is here, so a copy of the copy. But with my fingerprints on the copy, I'm not handing over the actual evidence. And guess what he did next? What happened then? Suddenly, he stood up and shouted, "You're treating your father like a criminal." And then, he kept insisting to the executive that what I was saying was a blatant lie, a misunderstanding. Huh? I couldn't help but feel amused. What was that man thinking? But you've got to give it to the executive. He seemed to understand what I was getting at. He turned the questions towards him. You know, there's a hierarchy in companies, right? I guess he was aiming for the executive's position. It seemed like the executive was assessing his character. First, he kicked him out of the room, then turned to me and said, "Did you ask for this interview not for a job, but for this?" Yeah, I did apologize. I'm truly grateful for the scouting from your company. It's a very attractive company. But I wondered, what if it's an unethical company that would just keep a person like him? Bold as brass. I couldn't believe he could say that so smoothly in an interview. The executive was really a great person. Whether or not I join, he thanked me for letting him know. He mentioned when Dad remarried after the divorce, he wondered why Dad chose a much younger woman. And he remembered you, Mom. Really? Yeah. You said our wedding was small scale, right? The executive was there as one of the few guests, as a supervisor back then. That's so. But he said that Dad had been telling everyone around him that he was the one cheated on, but he didn't ask for alimony and just divorced. However, the executive had his doubts about why Dad didn't take custody of me. He guessed it might be me from the photo and the name. What? At that time, you didn't have the knowledge to fight back, so we were thrown out. That's true. I'm so sorry. If it were now, I'd definitely fight with a lawyer, but back then, It's okay. I know you were a full-time homemaker before being suddenly thrown out and had to start working to raise me. Mom, I don't remember much about Dad. He was always gone, maybe working, maybe not. Yes, Michael was hardly ever home back then. Perhaps marrying me was a mistake for him in the first place. He rarely took me to his family's home. Only during holidays, and when we went, I was just made to help in the kitchen. And otherwise, we just missed each other with his work. He said he bought a house, but he decided it, and suddenly we were living there. I realized in elementary school that our family was different. So I acted out a bit back then.
What? You did?
Yeah, an early case of teenage rebellion. So right when I entered middle school, I sensed there was another woman.
What are you saying?
I didn't tell you because I thought it would make you sad. But I regretted not speaking up, especially when he threw the divorce papers at you and told you to leave. His voice was strained. I had never heard Kevin speak like that before. Mom, I decided I needed a weapon that would make me indispensable. A weapon? Something that would let me eventually hold him accountable for what he did. Then Kevin said, I hate to say it, but I took your situation as a lesson on what not to do. A lesson? Yeah, maybe. He easily discarded you, and nobody could oppose it because you and your family didn't have the knowledge to fight back. To be honest, I'm also angry at your brothers.
You're not going to your uncles?
No, too much hassle. But even if I get a good job and succeed, I'll never associate with them. Oh, except Grandma. Really? I felt a bit relieved. Yeah. Because Grandma remembered your situation and repeatedly told me she was sorry.
When did she tell you this?
After I entered university. My cousins from your brother's side were acting flirty because I was in that university, which was annoying. I was shocked. I had no idea my nieces behaved like that. Hey Mom, what if we took Grandma in?
What?
She's always been sorry towards you. It seems painful watching her have to be careful around my aunt and them. Thank you. After we finished talking, I brought up something that had been on my mind. By the way, I've been getting a lot of calls from unknown numbers lately. Let me see, Kevin said, taking my phone. Oh, this. It's his family's number. The executive told me. Kevin said dismissively. Then he called them and put it on speaker mode. Hello? Hello, is that Kevin? It was my ex-mother-in-law's voice on the other end. Kevin muttered under his breath about her calling him by his first name. Yes, I heard from your father. You went all the way to a doctoral program at that university, and you're getting company offers. To think that a young man born to that woman turned out so well. It must be thanks to our family's blood. Kevin muttered to himself again. Hey, would you like to be adopted into our family? You're gonna be busy and need money, right? Better than staying with that poor woman. Plus, you're old enough now, right? We can arrange a good marriage for you. How about it? Sounds good, right? Kevin, are you listening? I apologize for being such a woman. I spoke coldly into the phone. By the way, did you think I had cheated?
Well, that's...
Oh, I see. It's not true. In that case, Kevin says he won't hold back. Let me pass the phone to him. Long time no see. I was surprised to hear from the company executive that my mom was accused of cheating. So, you were part of it too.
No, we were deceived by Michael.
You're calling my mom that woman, but you realize you were complicit in a crime, right?
What?
Unfortunately, the statute of limitations has passed, but your son committed bigamy by forging divorce papers and remarrying. It's embarrassing that I'm related to such a person. Of course, I want nothing to do with his parents. Oh, and a lawyer will be contacting your son soon from me and my mom.
You don't want the inheritance? When I die, it'll all go to you.
Kevin snorted. I don't need that. You should worry about the alimony payments instead. He ended the call. Did I go too far? I shook my head vigorously. And laughter bubbled up from within.
That's the spirit. If you're going this far, I need to step up too.
Kevin patted my back with encouragement. After that, I got a lawyer through Kevin's friend and started working on an alimony claim. The usual statute of limitations for alimony claims due to infidelity is 3 years. But I learned here about something called an exclusion period. It's valid for 20 years from the act of infidelity. I found out about Michael's cheating 13 years ago. but never investigated who he remarried or the details. I couldn't bear to think about it and didn't have the capacity. But I looked into it again. Included in the alimony claim were the facts of him forging the divorce papers and then submitting a marriage registration, constituting forgery and bigamy. Although we couldn't pursue criminal charges due to the statute of limitations, it served as a weapon for the alimony claim. I claimed alimony from Michael and his current wife and 4 years of child support for Kevin. After that, my phone started ringing non-stop again. Bigamy? What have you told him? You're ruining me. You want to destroy my wife and kids too? I let you live comfortably for 14 years. Don't think this will end here. So I replied just once. Why not sell your house then? And then I changed my phone number. As a result of our double attack, Michael paid the alimony, was demoted from HR manager, and transferred to a far-off factory as an assistant manager. I heard this from the executive I met again. Apparently, his new position is akin to a nominal busybody, unable to defy the factory manager. Indeed, even with the statute of limitations, now that several of his crimes have come to light, his reputation has hit rock bottom. He was on the elite track in the company, but now it's over. The pharmaceutical company's factory is located far from the capital region. Michael had to sell his apartment and turn it into alimony for me as part of his transfer. That was the only way he could pay the amount we demanded. Moreover, his wife and children had to move with him. It seems she had no one else to rely on. She married him at 20, just like me, and had been a homemaker ever since, enjoying the status of a high-ranking husband's wife. That backfired. She wanted to stay in the capital region with her children, but that was impossible. Her parents' home is as rural as the place he was transferred to. Apparently, she's not well liked by her in-laws. But I have my doubts about the in-laws too. Given how they treated me, I'm not surprised, but marrying off their son to a 20-year-old bride twice should have been a sign for them to sort out their son. They should have advised their criminal son before cutting off their incompetent grandchildren. Well, that's probably why they cozied up to Kevin. Ah, here's a brilliant grandchild. But that's irrelevant to Kevin. By the way, I heard an interesting story. After settling the alimony issue, my lawyer shared this with me. Wow, that guy is really a city boy through and through. What do you mean? His new place of work requires a car. I clapped my hands in realization. He's over 50 and rushing to a driving school to desperately get a driver's license. Both he and his wife. His wife too? Without a car, they can't survive there. For things like taking kids to and from school, shopping. Also, in such rural areas, you won't get hired for part-time work without transportation. I laughed, realizing the situation. I have a driver's license. My mother insisted I get it, even lending me money for it. That was the right decision. Just hearing about them is hilarious. A proud former elite over 50, chased by mundane tasks, learning the hard reality of getting a license from strict driving instructors. And the following spring, Kevin entered a training institute of another company, finally able to focus solely on his research, enjoying every day. Revenge is over. Now it's time for fun, for my youth. Well, an early marriage isn't always good, right? My mother, who now lives with us, often muses. Exactly. Kevin, who never had time for a girlfriend, now has the chance to find someone right for him. With Kevin's employment, we moved to a slightly bigger place, roughly midway between our workplaces. For a while, the three of us want to peacefully enjoy these long-awaited days. After a long spell, we finally got a sunny holiday morning. While hanging out the bedding, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. Entering the living room were John and Emily. Both carrying a lot of stuff and panting, but upon seeing me, they grinned and dropped a bombshell. We're moving in with you from today. If you don't like it, divorce and leave. Stunned, I watched as they started spreading out their belongings in the living room. Then, Sarah entered, looking apologetic, and I quietly spoke up. Is this really okay? I mean, she's... What? John, hearing my words, turned pale and dashed out of the house. A few minutes later, he called, shouting loud enough for Emily to hear.
Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything?
Oh, I mentioned it before, didn't I? After a pause, John said, I'm coming back home, and hung up abruptly. Emily looked like she was about to faint at John's yelling. I can't wait for John to come back. At my words, Emily flinched. Brace yourself, the real fight starts now. I am Linda Thompson, a 45-year-old office worker. Last year, I got transferred to a department with lots of overtime, leading to hectic days. I married John when I was 40. We met at a company year-end party where John was a guest. I was his hostess, and we hit it off since we were from the same hometown. John, 5 years my senior, was a go-getter, and I was grateful, having given up on marriage as I neared 40. We married after a year of dating. The wedding was simple, as John said it was unnecessary, a decision I now regret.
Hey! You skipped laundry again.
John is a traditional, dominant husband. Despite living alone before marriage and knowing how to do household chores, he believes men shouldn't do them and left everything to me. I was going to do it tonight. I got home late from overtime. Exhausted and scolded as soon as I got home, I felt even more drained. John, unhappy with my response, started to get angry.
Don't talk back. Who do you think provides for you?
Frankly, I earn more than John. We both knew this when we married and chose to work together. But a year into the marriage, he seemed to forget. Initially, I argued back, but as John's temper flared, I started apologizing quickly to keep the peace. I'm sorry. It was my fault. Do you really think so? Yes, thank you. Your hard work is what keeps us going. This would satisfy John. And he'd cheerfully go to take a shower. At first, I found his dominant nature manly, but after 3 years, I was fed up. I didn't choose divorce because his parents were wonderful. I would have lunch monthly with his mother, and his father gave me birthday gifts. When visiting them, John was kind and the time was pleasant. My own parents passed away early, so his parents were as dear to me as my own. That's why I hesitated about divorce, but I had my limits. That was Emily, John's sister, living nearby. She's divorced. Apparently due to her infidelity. Since learning this, I've been uncomfortable around her. Emily disliked me too and would badmouth me, even in front of John. John adored Emily and never reprimanded her, often joining in the criticism. Emily, who I've been dealing with, has a daughter, Sarah, with her ex-husband. Sarah looks just like Emily but is the complete opposite in character, a really sweet girl. She visits Emily about twice a month. And every time, Emily brings her over to our place. Hey Linda, could you feed Sarah some good food? I gotta head out soon.
What? So sudden?
Just take care of it, okay? Emily would leave without waiting for my response. And Sarah would always apologize. I couldn't leave kind Sarah alone, so I always ended up feeding her and taking her out. Thanks for everything, Linda. Did you have fun?
Yeah, a lot. Can I come again?
Of course. I couldn't say no to Sarah, who would ask so timidly. Having no kids myself, I'd grown fond of her. But I wondered if it was right for Emily to be absent from Sarah's visits. I decided to ask John. Hey, isn't it a bit much that Emily's never here when Sarah visits? Couldn't she spend a bit more time with her? I only had Sarah's best interests at heart, but John didn't take it that way. His face turned red, and he yelled at me like a madman.
Emily's been hurt by the divorce. She's delicate, not like you. And you blame her?
No, I just wondered where she goes, leaving Sarah here.
It's none of your business. Just shut up and do as you're told.
John wouldn't listen to reason, so I dropped the subject. After multiple apologies, he calmed down and started getting ready to go out. I'm stepping out.
Where to?
That's my business. Just say have a nice day. John stormed out, slamming the door. Leaving me alone in the silent room, crying. That's when I seriously started thinking about divorce. I wanted to divorce, but hesitated because of my in-laws. Then, my mother-in-law invited me for lunch. John warned me before I left. "Where are you going on your day off?" "I'm going to have lunch with your mother." "Don't bring up Emily with Mom." "Why not?" I didn't understand the meaning, so I asked him again. Then, John seemed irritated and started yelling. "Just don't. Are you that dense? Just go, but don't mention Emily." He pushed me out of the house without waiting for my reply. Confused, I met with my mother-in-law for lunch. "Emily's staying with you, right?" "What? You knew?" "I'm sorry, dear." My mother-in-law apologized, saying Sarah had told her I was being burdened. "Emily's obsessed with a nightclub or casino, and in serious debt." "Debt?" "That's right. It looks like she has quite a bit of debt." I was shocked. Emily always dressed in designer clothes when she visited. I told this to my mother-in-law, who looked even more troubled. "We've cut ties with her. You should cut ties too. John's just spoiling her." She revealed that even when Emily's infidelity came out, John blamed it on her ex and even paid off some of her debts. John was overly protective of his sister. I was told that he had taken over debts in the past, which completely opened my eyes. "I'm thinking of divorcing John. Sorry to be a bother." "That's only right. I'll help you." She held my hand, and I planned my divorce. Thinking of what my mother would be like if she were still alive, I decided to start planning for divorce. Doing everything discreetly to avoid John's notice. I tried to talk to him about Emily's debts, but he wouldn't listen. I lost all affection for him, who yelled at me. With my in-laws' help, I gathered evidence and learned shocking truths. All that was left was to set a date for the final move, and that day came unexpectedly. On a long-awaited sunny holiday morning. While I was airing out the bedding, I heard hurried footsteps. Entering the living room were John and Emily, both loaded with bags, panting heavily. Spotting me, they grinned mischievously and dropped a bombshell. "We're moving in with you from today. If you don't like it, divorce and leave." Stunned, I watched as they began spreading their stuff in the living room. Then, Sarah, looking sheepish, followed them in, prompting me to speak up quietly. "Is this really okay? I mean, her." "What?" John, hearing this, turned pale and bolted out of the house. Minutes later, he called, yelling so loudly that even Emily could hear. "This is nonsense. Why didn't you say anything?" "Oh, I mentioned it before, didn't I?" After a brief silence, John snapped, "I'm coming back," and abruptly hung up. Emily looked like she was about to faint at John's yelling. "I can't wait for John to come back." At my words, Emily visibly shuddered. "Brace yourself, the real fight is about to begin." Upon his return, John confronted Emily. "Emily, what's this about debts? I didn't know anything about this. It's just a little debt." As Emily answered, avoiding eye contact, I couldn't help but chuckle. She glared at me, and I decided to enlighten her. "Wow, Emily, having a $300,000 debt and calling it little. I couldn't say that, that's too much for me. Rich people are different." $300,000? Emily looked at me, her face a mix of shock and dismay. But I didn't relent and continued. I continued to talk one-sidedly. "I heard your friend recently got married. Looks like he dumped you." "I'm not dumped. Once we get this house, he'll come back. And with the money from selling this place." "Oh." Realizing she'd spilled her plan, Emily looked at John, regret written all over her face. John, utterly confused, looked back and forth between Emily and me. I told him the harsh truth. "Emily planned to kick me out, then you, to sell this house and pay off her debts, and then shower her boyfriend with gifts." "What?" John stood there, stunned, unable to believe his beloved sister was using him. "All lies, then? You said you wanted to live with Sarah, that I'd work and support you both." Hearing John, my head ached. He couldn't support his wife but planned to support his sister and niece? Emily defiantly responded.
You're just an ATM to me, John. Once we sell the house, I can go back to him. Won't you help me out?
ATM? What the?
Oh, shut up.
Emily's brazen attitude and John's furious yelling left me out of their equation. Their quarrel was ugly and absurd. It was Sarah who finally spoke up.
John, Mom, enough. I don't want to live with you, and I came here today to say goodbye. Sarah! What do you mean?
Both Emily and John were stunned, stopping their fight to look at Sarah. She sighed heavily, looked straight at Emily, and began to speak slowly.
Mom, you're not interested in what I have to say, right? I think I mentioned it before, but I'm going to study abroad after high school. So, today was about saying goodbye. I never heard that!
Emily exclaimed loudly. Sarah looked at her mother coldly, her gaze icy.
That's because you never listen. You're always chasing after men. I don't need a mom like that. For me, Linda's been like a real mother. What? What do you mean by that?
Emily glared at us as if we were enemies. I was just as surprised. Sarah came over and hugged me tightly.
Thanks for always being there, for the delicious meals, for listening, and for taking me out. You felt like my real mom.
Sarah's words made me tear up. Everything I had done for her felt rewarding, filled with a sense of fulfillment and happiness. I never had children, so I often wondered if I was doing right by Sarah. I was very impressed.
Sarah, I've been so happy to have you. Do your best over there, okay?
As I wiped my tears, Sarah smiled at me.
Yeah, I want to call and message you.
Is that okay?
Of course.
We shared a smile, while Emily looked on, seething with envy. Then, as if struck by an idea, she started to smirk.
Sarah,
I'll come with you.
What?
Why?
It'll be hard for you alone over there.
Let's live together.
They're gonna pay for living expenses, right?
Her audacity left me speechless. Sarah looked just as appalled. Unaware of our reaction, Emily fantasized about her life abroad.
While you're at school, I'll go to the beach or shopping, and while she's at work, I'll nap. At night, maybe I'll go out.
Emily's plan was all about play, no work. Sarah looked at her with contempt, then suddenly burst into laughter.
What's so funny? It's hilarious. Like I'd want to live with you. And I'm staying in a student accommodation, so you can't come.
Emily's face turned red with anger. But Sarah didn't stop. Just as Emily was about to snap and lunge at Sarah, a stern voice intervened.
Enough of this. Dad!
My father-in-law appeared in the living room, with my mother-in-law beside him, looking furious.
Linda told us everything. When will you stop causing trouble for others? Mom! It's a misunderstanding. Sarah decided this on her own.
Emily's explanation was cut short as our mother-in-law raised her hand. A slap echoed in the room, followed by silence. Emily was the first to speak.
That's terrible. Hitting me.
My mother-in-law sharply retorted.
You deserved it. You've been a nuisance to Linda. I was wrong to leave you be. You're going to live with relatives from now on.
Emily, pale-faced, turned to John for help, but he looked away, having realized her betrayal. Left alone and in despair, Emily was led out by my father-in-law.
Look, I'm sorry. I should have listened more to what Linda had to say. From now on, I'll make sure to listen. To think there'll be a next time, what an optimistic mind you have.
John's flippant remark was sharply cut down by my mother-in-law. John, taken aback, looked on as she continued with an emotionless expression.
I told you before, didn't I? To cut ties with Emily, especially if you were going to get married. But you didn't listen. The only choice you have now is divorce.
John's face turned pale as he looked over at me. I smiled at him, a bit of relief, before dropping him into hell. Then, when he felt a little relieved, I opened my mouth to send him to hell.
Let's get divorced. I'll be asking for alimony too. for your verbal abuse. And I know your infidelity.
Infidelity? What are you talking about?
John stumbled over his words, feigning ignorance. It was pathetic to think I ever found him reliable. I pulled out several photos from my bag. You know this woman, don't you?
Did you spy on me?
It's your own fault for doing things worth spying on, isn't it?
Ugh.
John, with no room for argument, stayed silent, looking defeated. I laid out the papers in front of him and had him sign. After everything was finalized, I spoke to John with a smile. Thanks for everything. But, to be honest, I earned more, did all the housework, and managed everything else. It was me who took care of you. So, take care. And don't forget the payments. John had nothing to say in response. I said my goodbyes to my mother-in-law and left our home. My belongings would be picked up later, and I planned to spend the night at a nearby hotel after dropping Sarah off at her place. The room was beautiful, the bed soft. A space where there's no one to complain about. That night, I regained my freedom for the first time in 5 years. The next day, I officially asked a lawyer to proceed with our divorce. My mother-in-law apologized and assured me that John would transfer the full alimony within a week, which he did. John had given most of his savings to Emily, so my in-laws covered the alimony. And said they'd make sure John paid them back in full. John lost his job and, along with Emily, was sent to live with a different relative. They run a ranch, and he's worked hard every day without a break. Escape is impossible for him since he's never driven on mountain roads before. While I feel it's tough for him, I don't pity him. John's mistress turned out to be a nightclub worker who saw him as just another customer. She didn't even know he was married and apologized to me. Even returning the designer bags he'd given her, which I sold and used the money for lunches with Sarah. Emily ended up with relatives near the sea, working hard from dawn every day. Her once well-maintained appearance has deteriorated. Apparently, she's working off the child support debt she owed Sarah's father, which the relatives had to cover. I can only hope that she will change her mind even just a little. Sarah, on the other hand, successfully went abroad and is enjoying her dorm life. She's made a close friend and plans to bring her to the States during a long break. She asked if they could stay at my place and go sightseeing, which I happily agreed to. As for me, life is busy as usual. But so much better without someone complaining all the time. That alone makes me feel quite different. Although my life is busy, I am spending a very fulfilling life. I've even started seeing Sarah's father, a kind man with similar interests. He was a very nice guy and we exchanged contact information. As we kept talking about Sarah, we started going out together. We shared hobbies and tastes, so just being with him makes me feel at ease. We've grown close, and it's a comfort I never had with John. Sarah's thrilled about us and jokingly asked when we're getting married. I haven't thought that far, but who knows what the future holds. For me, Sarah is like a real daughter. Sarah thinks so too. I hope we can become a true family someday. With that hope, I head to work each day, looking forward to what the future might bring. Finally got rid of that old man, huh? The tasteless man burst out laughing, spitting as he spoke. That hateful person, who I couldn't stand to even look at, was my brother. He hadn't come to the wake or funeral, and now he returns home, not to pay respects to my father, but to spew such vile words. I couldn't tolerate it.
How can you say such a thing?
I yelled, appalled at his crassness. But my brother, unfazed, continued to sneer. That stubborn old man never listened to me, good riddance. Now this house will finally be mine. Owning a house means you've made it, right? Apparently, my brother had returned, not to greet our father, but to lay claim to the house. Throughout our father's illness, he never helped, only asking for money. Having a family to support, a rent-free house must seem very valuable to him. That's why I couldn't help but laugh to myself.
You think you'll get this house after all the trouble you've caused and not even attending the funeral?
Noticing my mocking smile, my brother frowned unhappily. What? Of course, it's mine. Did he leave a will or something? He glanced at the envelope in my hand. Assuming it contained the will. Too bad for you. Even if he didn't leave me anything in the will, the law dictates how much a child can inherit from a parent. If I'm not satisfied with what's in there, I'll sue right away," he said, smirking again. Then he dismissively waved his hand at me. "Get out of here. This house is mine now." At that moment, I burst into laughter. Wiping tears from the corner of my eyes, I looked at my bewildered brother and said, "Oh, it really did turn out just like Dad said." I'm Victoria. 3 years ago, I married a slightly older man, and we've been both working since. It's been 10 years since my mother passed away, and my father, who now lives alone in our spacious family home, has recently become weaker in his legs. To support him, I convinced my husband to move in with him. I do have an older brother, but I never thought of asking him to take care of my father. My brother, 6 years my senior, seemed like a serious soccer player until elementary school, but his behavior worsened during his rebellious phase due to bad influences from friends. He would stay out late, ignoring not just our gentle mother but also our strict father, and often hung out with bad company. I was in early elementary school back then and didn't like my brother much because he rarely came home and was cold to me when he did. His bad associations didn't seem to end even years later. When my brother was a university student, he caused major trouble involving a woman. My father even had to apologize to the woman's family. Though I wasn't told the specifics, I had a pretty good idea, given my brother's rough manner towards me. As his sister, I could have retaliated, but romance complicates things. I worried about the woman and despised my brother for treating her so poorly. Unrepentant, my brother, upon father's return from apologizing, didn't apologize himself but yelled, "Why are you doing this without listening to me? You're a failure as a parent. If you treat me like this, it's no wonder I turned out bad." My mother tried to calm the situation, but my angry father retorted, "How can you say that after hurting a woman? You're no longer my son, and you're incapable of thinking of others. Don't show your face here again." My brother left, saying fine by me, but a month later, a voice message arrived. It seems my father stopped sending my brother money for tuition and living expenses right after he left. Worried, my mother wanted to call back, but my father angrily refused, and I agreed to ignore it. The calls stopped after a week, and we lost track of my brother. Later, my mother fell ill. She fought hard but passed away. She mentioned my brother until the end, so I tried to find him in secret, hiding it from my father. But with no common friends, I couldn't reach him in time for her last moments. However, my brother suddenly returned home soon after. I was surprised but told him about my mother. "Well." My brother responded briefly after hearing of my mother's passing, but the next moment, he said, "Hey, tell Dad to lend me some money. It's his fault I dropped out of college and couldn't get a decent job, so he should take responsibility." I was infuriated by his insensitivity, demanding money from my father who was already weakened by the loss of my mother, and I yelled at my brother, sending him away. My brother talked only of his hardships, seemingly oblivious to why my father had disowned him. I thought that someone like him, even if he was my brother, should not be allowed near our beloved father. However, my brother would show up at our family home every few months, attempting to see my father. It was okay when I was there, but I became anxious when I started working. My father's mobility worsened year by year, so he spent more time alone at home, only leaving when he felt well enough to go to work. I repeatedly told him to always keep the doors locked to avoid contact with my brother. "I can handle him with one hand," my father would say with a laugh. But I worried about the potential harm my brother could cause, given their age difference. Fortunately, my brother's visits became less frequent, and when I got married and began living at the family home with 3 of us, the worry decreased. Yet, considering the worst-case scenario, my husband and I had extensive discussions and decided to prioritize supporting my father's life. "If I become unable to move freely, I'll live in a facility," my father had said, considering our feelings, but I insisted on taking care of him at home. I tried to minimize the burden on my husband, using day services effectively while I was at work.
But, after losing my mother, my father continued to weaken, seeming joyless and withdrawn. He gently refused my invitations to his hobbies like fishing or chess, spending all day indoors. His health deteriorated, and 3 years after we started living together, he passed away. Caught up in funeral arrangements and inheritance procedures, a week passed in a blink. Each time I disposed of one of my father's belongings, it felt like erasing evidence of his existence, so I hesitated many times, but I knew it wasn't good to keep them forever, so I sorted through my feelings. Having worked non-stop both day and night, I took a day off to rest at home. As I lay in bed, recovering from sleep deprivation, I heard the sound of a large truck stopping nearby. This area is full of narrow alleys, but is it okay? I wondered, but then I heard a click from the front door and jolted up, startled.
Could someone have entered by mistake? Or a burglar? Even in broad daylight with people around?
My husband always locks the door when he leaves for work, so it shouldn't be open. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might leap out of my mouth as I approached the entrance. Through the frosted glass of the door, I saw 3 silhouettes. Before I knew it, the sliding door was opened with a rattle, and I was faced with both familiar and unfamiliar people.
Good, the lock isn't broken. What, you're still here? Well, that's fine, I guess. It would be troublesome to be accused of breaking and entering when no one's around.
My brother muttered incomprehensibly. Standing beside him was a woman around his age and a small child. Though I had never met them, they were undoubtedly his wife and son. Despite being our first encounter, they looked at me suspiciously without a smile.
We have movers waiting outside, so I'll greet you later. Hey, help us move in. This is a chance for you to bond with my wife and son, and it'll make our move quicker. 2 birds with 1 stone. What? Moving in?
I doubted my ears. The large truck I had heard earlier seemed to belong to movers carrying my brother's belongings. My brother smirked unpleasantly, starting to talk boastfully.
I saw Dad's name in the newspaper. Finally, that old man kicked the bucket. We celebrated as a family. He was a lousy father, but as his son, I thought it's only right to inherit the house. I plan to live here from today. You shouldn't stay here any longer, so leave immediately.
While I stood there in shock, my brother's wife quickly entered and began unloading their belongings. The child, perhaps excited by the large house, started running around.
Wait, I haven't heard anything about this, and I can't just hand over the house like that,
I said, and my brother burst into laughter.
Handover? Dad's dead, so it's my house now. Or did you think caring for him meant you'd inherit? I saw through that. It's all in vain, the very definition of wasted effort. You might think I'm stealing from you, but traditionally, the son inherits. Understand? If you have time to argue, then leave immediately.
He vented his frustration on me, apparently holding a grudge for not letting him near my father. At the continued insults even after my father's death, my patience snapped. And I was about to retort when I heard a cracking sound behind me, so I ran to the source. And came upon a scene where his son was standing and at his feet lay a picture frame containing my father's portrait, fallen face down.
What are you doing?
I shouted, and the startled son tried to flee. Don't step on the glass, it's dangerous, I said firmly. It seemed that my brother's wife heard my shouting and came running, glaring at me fiercely. What's wrong with you, yelling at someone else's child like that? Are you insane? She accused me. Wanting to quickly restore my father's picture to its place, I regained some composure and began picking up the fragments of the frame. All the while, my brother's wife, holding the crying child, continued to hurl abuse at me.
Living in your parents' house even though you're married, you must have had a nice life. We never got any support from your father because you were in the way. Planning to inherit the house after just a few years of living together and taking care of things is utterly ridiculous.
She spat at me like a machine gun.
You probably didn't even take proper care of your father, did you? You just left him in a facility and relaxed with your husband. I heard your father had quite a bit of savings, and you made him pay most of the living expenses. The audacity of a younger sister like you. Normally, the son should be respected, right? I have a growing son, and have been married for over 3 years, so as the wife of his son, I have more right than you. Just leave quickly. I might forgive you for yelling at my son if you disappear now." Despite the fact that the child had broken an important portrait, there was no apology whatsoever, and I sighed at the sight of my brother's wife comforting the crying child, who was clueless about what had happened. For a moment, I paused, relieved that the child hadn't been injured, and pondered what to do next. If I didn't stop my brother and his family from continuing to bring their belongings into our family home, it would cause more trouble later. "I need you to listen to me for a moment." "What? After ignoring everything else, now you want me to listen to you? I didn't expect you to be this selfish. Dad and Mom must be crying in heaven. I won't be the chief mourner, but I'll attend the funeral and listen to you then. For now, I'm busy, so hurry up and pack your things," my brother said without even looking at me, scrutinizing the house as if appraising it for valuable items. But there was nothing of value left. As I pondered, a laugh escaped me involuntarily. My brother didn't miss my words. "What's so funny? Are you mocking me?" "Yes, I am. Because it's just like Dad said it would be." I could feel the tense atmosphere. But I wasn't intimidated. "I had intended to give you money the next time you came begging, but you never listened. Here, take this and read it carefully," I said, handing my brother a brown envelope. He snatched it, looking puzzled. "Writing me out of the will won't work. The law dictates the share of inheritance. I'll sue you immediately." As he saw the words of the will in the envelope, my brother smiled triumphantly and unfolded the letter. It was indeed a copy of my father's will. About 2 months before he died, sensing his time was near, my father had prepared the will secretly. He was frugal and had left a substantial inheritance for both of us. The breakdown was almost equal between my brother and me, with slightly more for me due to the caregiving. However, it wasn't drastically less for my brother. The amount would allow for a comfortable living if one didn't indulge in luxuries. But seeing my sister-in-law today, dressed in brand-name skirt, boots, necklace, and bag, it was clear they led a far from frugal life. Her attire, too dressy for a moving day, hinted at her lack of common sense. "What? What does this mean?" my brother exclaimed, tearing the paper into pieces and throwing it on the floor. He had torn not just the copy of the will, but also copies of registry documents and a handwritten letter from my father. "The house is already sold? That's impossible." Before he passed away, my father had informed me about his plans for the house. He would come to claim the house as soon as he heard of my death. So, I had already been making arrangements to transfer it to Simon. He just turned 20 this year and about to start a business. He is a promising young man. I had been very fond of him and wanted to help him out. "I left something else for you since I couldn't leave you the house. I want your husband and you to live a happy life together." Simon was one of Dad's nephews. Dad got along well with all his siblings, and I often saw Simon around. A solid, kind-hearted young man, much like my uncle. I was fine with Simon inheriting the property and happily accepted Dad's decision. Simon was set to move in soon, and it was agreed that my husband and I could stay until then. I was already in the process of gradually packing. My brother, completely unaware of this, turned red with anger and shouted, "Who would be happy to buy such an old house? You're probably just giving it away to some relative. Who's getting this house? Tell me now so I can sort it out." The letter from Dad only mentioned selling the house. I had blacked out the personal information on the registry documents, which turned out to be a wise decision. Before I could respond, my brother's wife snapped at him, "What are you going to do now, after packing everything? Why didn't you confirm this earlier? You're really stupid." This seemed to hurt my brother's pride, and he grew even angrier. "You know who inherited this house, don't you? Contact them now, and either get this house back or give us your new house," he demanded illogically. "Why would that even happen?" "Yes, we're moving into a new place, but it only has space for us to live," I replied calmly, but my brother was too panicked to listen. "This kind of important matter is usually discussed with the whole family. Aren't you unsatisfied too?" Inheriting the house to someone other than us. He rambled on, making no sense. I lost my patience. What? Don't compare me with you. I heard about this directly from Dad and agreed to it. You've been disowned for a long time and never even came to apologize, so you have no right to say anything now. My brother bit his lip in frustration, then continued. Then give me half of the money from selling the house. We are the only heirs. I have the right to inherit too. That amount is included in your inheritance share. The sale proceeds were partly used for Dad's treatment and the funeral. After settling all the expenses, what's left was divided in half. It can't just be this much. My brother fumed, his face red and sweaty. I sighed at his rage. It's an old house, as you yourself said. It didn't sell for a high price, and funerals aren't free, so this is what it amounts to. My brother fell silent at my words. However, his wife burst out again. This isn't what I heard. I decided to marry you because you said you were the wealthy eldest son of a rich family. You lied to me. Astonishingly, my brother had been boasting to his wife. It was one thing for his wife to decide to marry him thinking he was wealthy, but my brother's nature of exaggerating himself hadn't changed since childhood. Not wanting to escalate into a domestic argument, I tried to reason with my brother internally. But you haven't been left with nothing by Dad. Just save that inheritance, work steadily, and eventually, you can build your own home. My brother grimaced silently. And his wife kept frowning while playing with her smartphone. So, we can't go back home now? My brother's son muttered quietly. What do you mean we can't go back home? Suddenly, my brother lunged at his son, so I instinctively shielded the boy. Don't lay a hand on the child. What's this about having no home? I asked again. My brother's unexpected reply came. I got fired from my job. That's why we couldn't pay rent and came here. He embezzled company money. It's so embarrassing to get caught. But he said we'd have plenty of inheritance from his father, so I followed him. Now look at this mess. I'm the victim here. This is all because of your reckless spending. Don't you have any sense of remorse? Blaming me? It's you who can't earn enough to support your wife and child properly. It just shows you're incompetent. They both started arguing, completely forgetting about their child. I wondered if the child always lived in such an environment. It made sense why he wasn't properly disciplined. Realizing that my brother hadn't changed his opportunistic ways, I tried to get them out of the house. Then, his wife clung to me, begging. Look, we're really in a bad situation now. We don't even have a home. Don't you feel sorry for my son? We were completely deceived by your brother. I'm not asking to live in your new house, but can you share some of the inheritance with me? I want to buy clothes for my son's upcoming birthday. My brother's wife, seemingly producing tears on cue, began to cry. Indeed, the child's clothes were slightly too short. But this led me to a question. Is your son's birthday coming up soon? Yes, he's turning 4 next month. My brother and his wife got married a little over 3 years ago. This was something she had just mentioned, so there was no mistake. That meant if their son was turning 4 next month, he must have been conceived before they got married. Did you marry my brother right after you met him? What? Yeah, but what's that got to do with anything? I was almost certain now. If her story was true, she would have been pregnant before meeting my brother. As I was about to ask more, she turned pale, realizing her slip-up. Why are you asking that all of a sudden? He's our child, so don't say weird things. My brother, noticing her agitation, reacted. Why are you looking like that? Got something to hide? From my perspective, it was unbelievable that my brother hadn't noticed her pregnant state at the time. He never showed interest in anything other than himself. Maybe it wasn't so strange that he hadn't noticed. However, as the silence from his wife grew more tense, my brother began to lash out at her. Then, she blurted out, "It's because you lied to me. My son is from someone I met at a nightclub I used to go to, but I chose you because I thought you had a better income." Taking her son, who was on the verge of tears, to another room. I called the police,
requesting their intervention to apprehend my brother and his family and to ensure the temporary protection of her son. Within minutes, the police arrived and took my brother and his wife, who were causing a disturbance without any concern for the neighbors. A child welfare officer accompanied them to ensure appropriate care for her son. Some time later, I learned that my brother and his wife had divorced. My brother had filed for alimony against her, as she confessed to having deceived him about the child's paternity. However, she was nearly penniless. She sold all her branded items but still struggled to make ends meet, working tirelessly from dawn to dusk, leaving her son in the care of her parents. Despite his precarious situation, my brother shamelessly returned to our family home. "I don't have any money, so can you give me a little support? I can't work because of the severe mental stress from my ex-wife." Every time he came asking for help, my husband turned him away. Unlike my scrawny brother, my husband used to be the captain of the rugby team, so he has a rugged face and a muscular build. Faced with a man of such appearance, my brother seemed to have no choice but to leave sheepishly, and for a while, there was no contact with him. However, when the time came to transfer our family home to my cousin Simon, my brother appeared and confronted Simon, accusing him of stealing his home. My husband restrained him and handed him over to the police. Fortunately, Simon wasn't seriously hurt. My brother received a substantial prison sentence, freeing us from any fear of his return. Grateful for the new beginning, Simon thanked us as we prepared to move into our new life. My husband and I decided to save the entirety of my father's inheritance and continue living modestly. The new house we built isn't big enough to boast about to others, but it's a satisfying home filled with both of our personal touches, so it seems we'll have even more enjoyable days ahead. "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well, so I need to leave early." I told my boss and got permission to leave early. In truth, while I was feeling a bit under the weather, the real reason I needed to leave early was something else entirely. As I entered my house, I heard some noises coming from the back room. Trying not to make any noise, I walked towards the back room and stopped in front of the door. Then, I heard indecent voices of a man and a woman coming from inside. Quietly, I opened the door and peeked inside. There were Mike and Emily, looking lovingly at each other. I really messed up marrying such an unattractive woman. Young and pretty is definitely better. I'm so happy. Let me make you feel even better. I involuntarily closed my eyes. Even though our marriage was on the rocks, I still wanted to believe. But now, faced with this reality, I can't run away. There's only one thing left to do. To bring down the two who have caused me so much pain. My name is Ashley Johnson. I'm a 30-year-old housewife working part-time at a major company. My husband is Mike, 2 years my senior, working in local real estate. Our meeting was 2 years ago at a party hosted by a friend. It was a gathering of about 10 people, evenly split between men and women. There was one man who seemed to be orchestrating everything around. That was Mike. He was brimming with confidence, always smiling, and made sure the conversation never died, entertaining everyone. I guess people like him are really good at their job. The first day I met him, that moment, I was drawn to Mike. But what about Mike himself? All the girls there were younger, cuter, and more fashionable than me. There's no way he would be interested in someone as plain and quiet as me. Watching everyone getting along, I thought I shouldn't have come. That's when it happened. "Let's drink together." Mike came over to me. I was so happy, I couldn't help but smile. Then Mike said, "You have a beautiful smile." Thanks to that one line, I felt instantly closer to him. We exchanged contact details and later went on our first date. From there, our relationship developed further, and 3 months after we met, we started dating. And a year later, "I'll definitely make you happy. Let's get married," Mike proposed. "I look forward to it." 6 months later, surrounded by well wishes, we became husband and wife. But married life wasn't as sweet as I thought. Being a working couple was harder than I expected. Far from the ideal I had in mind at the beginning of our marriage. That made me face the harsh reality. Mike was busy with work, usually getting home around 9 p.m. At first, we used to eat together even if he came home late, but then he stopped having dinner at home, saying he was eating out with colleagues. And gradually, we stopped having meals together. 3 months into the marriage, our conversations dwindled, and we began to drift apart. One day, returning from my part-time job, I saw Mike's shoes at the entrance.
Huh? He's back already?
Mike wasn't in the living room, but I found him asleep in the bedroom.
Mike? What's up? Are you feeling ill?
He slowly sat up and said he'd been thinking about something.
It's great we bought a condo after getting married, but I'm not okay with paying more of the mortgage.
I couldn't believe what he was saying. I was paying a significant amount too.
Don't compare us, Mike. I'm contributing too, you know that, right?
Mike paused, then said, "It's not enough. You should contribute more."
How can you say that? 80% of my part-time income goes to the mortgage. What more do you expect?
That's where I have an idea, Mike said. He then suggested something utterly selfish. Increase your part-time hours.
What?
Work more hours, earn more.
You said you wanted to work more, right?
Being cooped up at home all day is depressing. More hours, less discontent.
Plus, it'll help us pay off the mortgage faster. Wait a minute. Sure, more hours might ease things, but my body can't handle it.
I was already overwhelmed with household chores, let alone increasing my work hours. But Mike just insisted it would be fine. So, I suggested he help with the chores.
What?
Are you kidding me?
I work from dawn till late at night. And now you want me to do chores too? I'm not asking for everything, just help with things like taking out the trash or cleaning the bathroom.
Hearing this, Mike's expression hardened and he lashed out.
Don't get carried away because I'm being lenient. Why should the man of the house do chores? That's a housewife's job, something you should be doing anyway. And no way your increased work hours will make a big dent in the mortgage. What can someone earning peanuts say? Talk about that after you earn like I do. You just need to listen to what I say. Got it?
I was so shocked by Mike's words, showing he only thought of himself, that I couldn't even argue back. I just listened. After that day, my relationship with Mike deteriorated even further. Every day, he pressured me to work longer hours. If I refused, I'd face his terrible verbal abuse. Out of fear, I told my boss I wanted to increase my work hours, but I was told it couldn't happen until the next month's contract. Mike's pressure continued during that time. Finally, a month later, I managed to get my working hours increased. But that was the beginning of 6 months of hell. With more work hours, I had less time for housework. I started work at 7 a.m. and finished at 5 p.m. After shopping, I'd get home around 6 p.m. and start on the household chores. Before I knew it, it was time for Mike to return home. And he still came home late, never helping with the housework. I ended up being chased by both work and house chores every day. My body and mind were increasingly exhausted, worsened by Mike's verbal abuse.
You can't even get the bath ready? You're a failure as a housewife. This is definitely grounds for divorce.
And on another day, you've aged recently.
Going straight to becoming an old lady because I don't pay attention to you? Please, don't make me your caregiver.
He was like a different person with his words and actions. I didn't even want to see or hear Mike anymore. Then, one day, Mike brought home a woman.
This is my cousin Emily. Nice to meet you, I'm Emily, his cousin.
They claimed to be relatives, but I had no memory of her.
Really a relative?
Skeptical, I questioned Mike, who insisted she was a relative. That didn't make sense. I had met all his relatives at our wedding and introduced myself. But I had never met Emily.
Were you at our wedding?
Mike quickly denied it.
She was too busy to come to the wedding. And since Emily is a distant relative, it's not strange that you don't know her.
I couldn't believe him. As I looked doubtful, Mike told me to get Emily a drink. Sighing, I went to the kitchen to make coffee, and Emily followed me.
Ashley, are you a full-time housewife?
No, why?
You look a bit aged. But now I understand why. Balancing a job and housework, you have no time to pamper yourself. I was irritated by Emily's words but restrained myself. Then Mike joined us, agreeing with Emily. Emily's got a point. You've been neglecting your makeup because you're busy. It's like you've given up on being a woman. And you can't even do housework properly. Remember when you didn't even get the bath ready when I was tired? Terrible, right? Wow, that's really bad. I'm definitely better than a woman who can't even do housework. They laughed and pointed at me. After that, they kept making snide remarks at me for 3 hours until Emily finally left. A week later, I came home from work and saw Mike's shoes and unfamiliar women's shoes at the entrance.
What's this?
Feeling uneasy, I went to the living room. There I found Mike and Emily drinking wine.
What are you doing?
You're back? I got home a while ago. Oops, sorry for intruding. They both seemed already tipsy, their actions suspicious.
3 cans of beer and wine? That's a bit much.
When I tried to take the half-finished wine, I faintly smelled body wash from Emily. And strangely, the same scent from Mike. I recognized that scent. It was the scent of the body wash I use. Why would they both smell the same? Then I noticed something different about Mike. You're wearing different clothes. I realized the odd feeling I had earlier. Mike was wearing clothes he usually saved for dates. That meant something. At that moment, my suspicions turned into certainty. That night, Emily stayed until 2 a.m. I was at their beck and call the whole time, cooking, running out to buy more drinks, and not even getting a chance to bathe. Hey, wake up. You'll catch a cold. Let's go to bed. I got the drunken Mike up and took him to bed. 3 weeks passed, and Emily was nowhere to be seen, but one thing had changed. My body wash was running out much faster. This intensified my doubts and left me restless. I had been thinking about something all this time. And then the day came. I'm sorry. I feel unwell and need to leave early. I told my boss and got permission to leave early. I wasn't feeling great, but more importantly, I had to leave early today. When I opened the front door and entered, I heard noises from the back room. I quietly approached and stopped in front of the door. Inside, I heard indistinct voices of a man and a woman. I softly opened the door and peeked inside. There were Mike and Emily, looking affectionately at each other. Marrying that ugly woman was a huge mistake. Young and cute is definitely better.
I'm so glad. Let me make you feel even better.
I had to close my eyes. Even though our marriage was falling apart, I still had a sliver of hope. But now, I couldn't run from the reality in front of me. I had to do something. To bring down the two who caused me so much pain. I took out my phone from my bag and started recording them. About 10 minutes passed. That's enough. I had enough evidence. Resolved, I burst open the door.
Ashley! Why are you here?
The two were in a state of panic at my sudden appearance. Without a moment's delay, I showed them the phone in my hand. This is the video I just recorded.
What? You're joking. Erase that now.
There was no way I was going to erase it. This was solid evidence of their affair. And it wasn't something only I should know about. I sent the video to your husband.
What? Husband? Emily, you're married.
Mike turned pale and confronted Emily, but she seemed not to hear his words and simply uttered.
Huh?
Do you understand what I said? I told you, I sent a video of what you two were doing to your husband.
What are you doing?
Right after I told her I sent the video, Emily, with a furious look, lunged at me. However, she got tangled in the sheets and fell off the bed with a thud.
Ouch!
Worried about Emily, Mike asked if she was okay and reached out to help her. What are you doing? Why are you trying to help her?
What do you want, Ashley? What's fun about doing such a terrible thing? What did we ever do to you? I was speechless with disbelief. They had no idea what they had done. They were no longer human to me, just animals driven by desire. It's tiring even to put it into words. There's perfect evidence, and you still won't admit to the affair. That's the end of you as a person. I showed them the video I had recorded earlier. Mike shouted, "Stop it. Erase it now. If you want to stop it, try to do it by force. You're a man, aren't you?" Provoked, Mike, face red with anger, tried to snatch my phone but, like Emily, got tangled in the sheets and fell off the bed. Damn! What are you two doing? Do your actions become similar when you keep being intimate with each other? I said, looking down at the two of them sprawled on the floor. Mike glared at me fiercely, and Emily looked defeated. Looking at me like that doesn't scare me. But are you okay with this? Fighting with me here? What are you talking about? Clueless, they looked at me, so I showed them the screen of my phone. Oh! The moment Emily saw the phone, she froze, mouth agape. I'm connected right now. If you have something to say, please go ahead. If you have the courage to talk to him, that is. Emily was stunned, and Mike didn't seem to understand what was happening. Mike, you don't understand, do you? Who I'm connected with right now. This person is Emily's husband. Emily had hidden her marriage from Mike and had an affair with him. Mike naively believed her. And ended up in this situation. Not that I have any sympathy for Mike, who was easily fooled. Mr. Smith, sorry to keep you waiting. I'll be there soon. Thank you. I ended the call, looked at them silently, and smirked. Then, as if coming back to her senses, Emily nervously looked at me. What? Why did you hang up? He's coming now. Who's coming? Your husband is coming here. Right after that, the doorbell rang. He's here. As I was about to go to the front door to greet Mr. Smith, Emily suddenly started to freak out. What? Emily, what's wrong? Mike was shocked at Emily's uncharacteristic behavior. Well, it's no wonder Emily reacted like that. Because Emily's husband is. Then the bedroom door opened, and in came a tall, gentlemanly man. What a pathetic sight. The moment Emily saw Mr. Smith, she clutched her head and started uttering nonsense. Ah! Mike was stunned by her disgraceful behavior. However, Mr. Smith, unfazed, addressed Mike. You must be Mike. My wife seems to have caused you quite some trouble. As this situation has unfolded, I must respond appropriately. As the head of a company, I cannot let this go unaddressed. Mike had been continuing his relationship with Emily without knowing about Mr. Smith's existence until now. When he learned about it at this very moment. I'll tell you about Mr. Smith. What kind of person he is. However, Mike's shocked expression suddenly turned serious, and he looked at us sharply. You talk about being a top executive and appropriate responses, but the real fault lies with you for neglecting Emily. You're making it sound like it's my fault. Besides, you're just some lowlife husband lecturing me. What kind of top executive are you? Probably just a third-rate company president. Talk to me when you earn more than I do. Jerk. How can he criticize others so selfishly after having an affair? I'm ashamed that I chose such a man as my husband for life. What? Can't say anything because I hit the nail on the head? That's why you get dumped by your cute wife and she runs off with another man. Pathetic. I can't even sympathize with you as a fellow man. I could only sigh in response. And I apologized to Mr. Smith for making him deal with such a man. Mr. Smith, with a kind smile, said, "It's okay." His kindness highlighted the stark difference between him and Mike. If you really want to know about Mr. Smith, I'll tell you. But it will shatter your pride. Huh? No way that's true. Mike continued with his arrogant attitude. You're really foolish. This man is the president of the company I work for. At that moment, Mike's face turned ashen. Huh? No, that can't be true. Because the company you work at is. You get it now, right? The president of the company I work for, that means something. I work at a local food manufacturer, Smith Iron Foods. It's a major company with well over 500 employees. And Mike's company happens to be a subcontractor for it.
No way! The president of Smith Iron Foods? But how did you and the president? Normally, a part-timer like me wouldn't exchange contact information with the president of the company.
Well, you guys created that opportunity, though. It's unheard of for a mere part-time employee to be in contact with the company's president. But due to a minor incident, I came to know Mr. Smith's contact details. This started 3 weeks ago, when I suspected Mike and Emily of having an affair. They were acting like lovers, touching intimately, even hugging. To anyone, it would seem like they were in a relationship. And during a brief moment when I was away, I found evidence in the trash that they had been intimate. Since then, my mind has been filled with thoughts of Mike's betrayal. And as if to add fuel to the fire, I was burdened with the daily tasks of work and household chores. Gradually, I could feel both my body and mind starting to break down. One day, during lunch break in the company cafeteria, Mr. Smith approached me.
Miss Johnson, you look quite exhausted. Is the office work too tough?
I was surprised. Despite not being a staff member, Mr. Smith, the president, knew me. He said he knew all the employees' names and sat down across from me. Then, unexpectedly, he started talking about himself. He married a woman 20 years his junior 3 years ago, and while the marriage started happily, his wife's attitude changed within 6 months. She stopped doing any housework and lived a life of leisure.
It's tough for you too, Mr. Smith. But why are you telling me this? I felt you might be going through something similar. Marriage is truly challenging. Unlike your situation, the reason for my marital issues is entirely my fault. I spoiled my wife too much, a classic case of being blinded by love.
Mr. Smith looked a bit sad as he said this. But something else caught my attention.
What's your wife like, Mr. Smith?
Without saying anything, he took out his phone and showed me a photo of his wife.
Is this really your wife?
I was shocked when I saw the photo.
Yes, it is.
The woman he pointed out as his wife was Emily, whom Mike had introduced as his cousin.
Emily, right? How do you know my wife's name?
I told Mr. Smith everything I knew.
I see, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for telling me. I'll remember this.
As he was about to leave, I stopped him.
I also have something I want to talk to you about,
I said to Mr. Smith. I told him about how Mike and Emily had been coming to the apartment almost daily and engaging in an affair.
How did you know?
By the scent. The fragrance of my body wash that wasn't there in the morning. They were always taking a shower before getting together, using my body wash. Indeed, the amount of body wash had been decreasing abnormally.
I see. But just knowing that doesn't seem like enough to do anything about it, does it? That's why I wanted to consult with you.
That's when I decided on the day to barge into the room.
For that reason? You say that, but anyone would wonder if the scent of their body wash was filling the room. If you're going to cheat, you should have been more careful about your surroundings.
Mike slumped his shoulders in defeat, and behind him, Emily, who had screamed herself hoarse, was staring blankly at the ceiling. Suddenly, Mike started muttering to himself.
Step back a bit. Eh?
Right after that.
Are you kidding me?
He came at me with a demonic look. But the next moment, Mike was suspended in the air and then fell to the floor.
Ugh! I've been learning Taekwondo, just in case something happened. Never thought it would come in handy here.
Mr. Smith then sternly addressed Mike, who was lying on the floor.
I will be reporting this matter to the president of your company. Knowing him, he will impose a severe penalty. Be prepared for that.
And for me too.
This is a divorce paper. I've already filled in my name, so I need you to write yours now. And because you spent all our savings on that woman, there will be no division of assets. As for alimony, you can look forward to a call from my lawyer soon.
Following that, both of them faced difficult times. Mr. Smith divorced Emily that day and demanded a substantial alimony. Emily, who had never worked before, now lives in a shabby apartment, working night shifts and allocating 90% of her earnings to pay the alimony. As for Mike, he signed the divorce papers on the spot and filed them immediately, finalizing the divorce. The next day, just as Mr. Smith said, Mike's boss demoted him and transferred him to a rural area. With the high alimony bill and his need to survive, he's been physically exhausting himself with construction work after his day job. Yet, he's still barely making ends meet and is now living a mentally tormented life. As for me, after the divorce, I sold the apartment we lived in and moved to a new one. My life, once devoid of freedom, is now filled with it. Since the incident, I've become quite close to Mr. Smith. I'm not ready to seek new relationships just after my divorce, but I hope to meet someone wonderful in the future. Of course, for now, my work and personal life are my top priorities.
This room gets such nice sunlight, doesn't it? Perfect for my room, right? Yeah, and it even faces the garden, nice.
Guided by the sales agent, Ms. Mary Johnson, my husband and I, along with my mother-in-law, were looking at a newly built house for sale. It's been 2 years since we got married. We decided to check out several houses for sale near the station, having saved up to buy a home. My husband and mother-in-law seemed to really like this new property with its many rooms.
Please feel free to check out the second floor too.
As the three of us started heading towards the stairs, Ms. Johnson grabbed my arm. She then said, "Can I have a word with you?" and took me outside. After a deep breath, she spoke earnestly. "I'll get straight to the point. Your husband, he's having an affair." Hearing this shocking truth, my world went dark. The sound of my shattered trust echoed loudly in my head.
Thank you. I'm glad you're our agent. Could you help me out a bit?
First things first, I need to investigate my husband. I'll gather evidence and bring down my traitorous husband. I'm Aria Davis, 41. A working housewife in my second year of marriage. Approaching my 40s and earning a decent salary in sales, I wasn't too interested in marriage. Maybe because many of my friends were enjoying their single lives. My husband, Owen, 5 years my junior, was a colleague from the same company and a drinking buddy for about 4 years. In our company, we had a close-knit group of drinking friends from various departments and ages, meeting several times a week for meals and drinks.
What do you do on your days off, Aria? I'm into movies, so I'm usually watching them at home or hitting the theaters. I even visit filming locations of my favorite movies. That's a cool hobby. I love old toys and spend my weekends antique shopping. Finding a tin robot or something, that's just the best.
Our hobbies were different, but both my husband Owen and I cherished our alone time. We really clicked in that we didn't conform to others outside of work and prioritized ourselves. Once, Owen invited me out for drinks to discuss something.
Aria, would you consider dating me, with marriage in mind? I feel like with you, we could both respect each other and enjoy life. Really? I mean, I do feel we share similar values, but you know I'm 5 years older, right?
Owen said he never felt the age difference, and like me, he wanted to respect each other's hobbies and didn't want kids. Every time someone asked me about marriage, I'd say, I'd consider it if having kids wasn't a requirement.
I'm not ready to be a parent myself, so no kids for me. But having a life partner would definitely be more fun, right?
I already had a good impression of Owen, and his perspective wasn't bad. So, we tried dating, and it was surprisingly comfortable with just the right amount of space. Pressured by Owen and our drinking buddies, we got married 6 months later. I lost my mother in my 20s, and my father 2 years before our marriage, so there was no one to oppose it. Owen always said, "My family is fine with it," but his mother wasn't too pleased with me being 5 years older and not wanting kids.
At your age and not even planning to have kids.
At our first meeting, mother-in-law was quite outspoken, which honestly surprised me.
I was honestly surprised. I thought my husband had talked to her and that she was okay with it.
In contrast, my father-in-law was truly happy about our marriage.
My wife and I have been separated for a year due to some reasons. So, don't mind what she says and just be happy together.
His words were a relief, especially after my mother-in-law's remarks. It seemed his parents always had different values and often argued, and last year, he finally declared he wanted a divorce. But when his wife begged, they avoided divorce by separating, with him paying for 2 households. After the meeting ended and it was just the 2 of us, my husband Owen looked apologetic.
Sorry about that. My mom's saying things like that. But I guess I'll have to take care of her eventually. Dad seems to have had enough.
Yeah, being the eldest son and all. Indeed, considering age and income, it seemed likely that the burden of care would fall on my mother-in-law. With a slight unease, we began our married life. After getting married, we started living in Owen's apartment. He had a dream of buying a house and creating a room for his collection, so we wanted to save up for a down payment. My husband's apartment was very close to mother-in-law's.
Welcome home. Let's have dinner together.
The day after we started living together, I came home to find my mother-in-law waiting at our door.
You're my daughter-in-law now. You better start learning how to be a good one. Get started on dinner, will you? Huh? Daughter-in-law training.
I felt oddly nervous about this concept of daughter-in-law training. But every day, she came to our house, ate the dinner I made, used our bath, and then left. The training involved complaints about my cooking and housekeeping, annoying remarks like "Don't you want kids?" or "You can't do much for your age, can you?" Was enduring such treatment supposed to be part of daughter-in-law training?
Hey, can you tell your mom to stop coming over every day?
While it wasn't anything major, this daily routine was taking a toll on me mentally. Just seeing mother-in-law waiting at the front door was disheartening. Since she's been alone after separating from dad, maybe she's just happy to have someone to talk to? Even seeing me distressed, Owen just smirked.
Then you should be her conversation partner. Why do I have to come home tired and take care of your energetic mom? You said it was daughter-in-law training, right? I'm an only child, so I'm thinking of living with mom eventually. I want you to get used to it now. What?
It seemed that when Owen said he'd have to take care of her, he meant living together. I felt a bit deceived, but after calming down, I thought maybe it was inevitable. So, it seemed wiser to get along with my mother-in-law. I switched to mostly just agreeing with her, but that might have encouraged her. I have plans for a drink tomorrow, so please have your meal at home.
What? You're going to leave me to eat alone? Then give me some money for dinner. It's the least you could do. All right, I understand. Since you're not having kids, you should at least take good care of me.
It felt more like I had become my mother-in-law's personal caretaker than undergoing daughter-in-law training. Lately, if I came home late, she would call repeatedly, and if I said I had plans, she'd ask for dinner money. I tried to get along with mother-in-law, but it only made her more presumptuous. When I vented my frustrations and anger to Owen, he'd say, "Sorry, I'll talk to my mom," but it didn't seem to have much effect. One day, I decided to confront mother-in-law directly.
I'm done with this daughter-in-law training. It's a bother having you over every day, so can you stop, please? And why do you need to come over so often anyway?
Surprised by my blunt words, mother-in-law looked shocked. I braced for a retort, but she just shrugged and pouted.
What can I do? Your father only pays for rent, so I don't have much money. My part-time job doesn't pay much. Don't be so stingy about a meal and a bath.
I felt like I'd been let down. My mother-in-law worked part-time, and my father-in-law covered her rent. I thought she could manage her finances just fine, but she had a penchant for fashion. She'd often brag to me about her expensive clothes and shoes.
Oh, I see. So you were coming over to save on food and utility bills.
I was utterly astounded. She had been simply using our place for her convenience. It would have been better if she had been upfront from the start, but even then, it was a nuisance.
Please stop this. If you continue being selfish, I'll talk to my husband about moving far away. Heh, you sure know how to talk for a 40-year-old. How about we make a deal? In exchange for not coming over, you secretly give me some money without telling Owen.
My mother-in-law's request was $1,000 a month. It seemed a small price to pay for peace. I thought of it as just starting to help out earlier than expected. After that, I got the marriage life I had always dreamed of. My relationship with my mother-in-law improved, and we would go out for meals together once a month. This was the perfect balance.
What did you say to Mom? Our relationship has improved a lot, and leaving it to you was definitely the right choice. We just had a good talk.
I had bought daily peace with money. With my mother-in-law no longer coming over, Owen seemed more relaxed and even started going out for drinks on weekdays with friends other than his work buddies. On weekends, we each did our own thing and went out to eat together when convenient. It seemed like there was nothing out of the ordinary, just peaceful and happy days. Little did I know, an unbelievable plan was being hatched behind my back. Nearly 2 years into our marriage, Owen suddenly suggested looking at houses. There were several for sale near a station 2 stops away.
A friend told me about them, and they were really nice. Let's take Mom and go see them together next time. Your mom too? Yeah, there are houses with spacious layouts, and it seems we can still choose. Plus, all the houses are stylishly designed.
Owen continued excitedly, apparently very taken with the idea. Indeed, the convenience was great, the houses were new and stylish, and the prices were not out of reach.
I'll take out a mortgage and make the payments, so could you use what you've saved up for the down payment, Arya? You said before that if you bought a house, you'd want to pay about 1/3 of it as a down payment, right? Did I say that? It depends on the price, but yeah, if we really decide to buy, I'd like to contribute a significant amount. All right, then let's go see them on our next day off.
Eager to move forward, Owen called his mother right away, and we arranged to go out all 3 of us that weekend. Come to think of it, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, when Owen had just joined our circle of drinking friends, we had indeed talked about buying a home. At that time, Owen had a girlfriend he was thinking of marrying and was advised against taking out a full loan without a down payment. We got into a lively discussion about how each of us would buy a house.
Yeah, I think I'd want to put down about 1/3 of the purchase price as a down payment. Oh, but if I were living alone, maybe buying an affordable used condo outright could be an option.
He remembered well something I had said casually in the moment. I never talked about my savings, but I wasn't opposed to considering it, depending on the price. If Owen was taking on the remaining payments, that might be a good idea. Anyway, touring properties sounded fun, so I was getting excited. We made a reservation online and went to the housing complex with his mother on the day. The sales agent guiding us around the venue seemed to have a moment of surprise when she saw my husband and me, her eyes widening as if she recognized us, but she quickly composed herself and greeted us.
Hello, I'm Mary Johnson, your agent for today. Please let me know how I can help you. We'd like to start with houses that have more rooms. You have ones with at least 4 bedrooms, right? Yes, we do. Let's start there.
Owen was particular about having more rooms because he wanted his own collection room and to have separate living spaces for his mother and us. His main concern was having an independent room on the first floor. The first property we entered, the one with the most rooms, seemed to catch both Owen's and his mother's fancy. It had an additional room following the living room, and one more separate Japanese-style room.
This room gets such nice sunlight, doesn't it? Perfect for my room, right? Yeah, and it even faces the garden, nice.
The garden wasn't very large, but opening the windows revealed a lawn that gave a sense of openness. Though slightly over budget, it was not a bad candidate.
Please feel free to check out the second floor too.
As the 3 of us began heading towards the stairs, Ms. Johnson took my arm. She said, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" and led me outside.
Excuse me, but weren't you in the volleyball team at T Middle School, Ms. Smith? Excuse me? Yes, Smith was my maiden name. My maiden name was Martinez. Don't you remember? Wait, Mary? The small and cute Mary?
The sales agent turned out to be a junior from my middle school days. We went to different high schools, so it had been a whopping 28 years since we last met. Her eyes, which crinkled when she smiled, hadn't changed, but her once skinny frame had filled out. I probably wouldn't have recognized her if she hadn't spoken to me. Above all, I was impressed by her age-appropriate composure and her professional demeanor. She took a deep breath and spoke earnestly.
I'll get straight to the point. Your husband, he's having an affair.
I burst out laughing at first. But she wasn't laughing, she had a serious expression on her face. It didn't seem like a joke.
What do you mean? This is the first time you've met my husband, right? No, he came here a few days ago.
Oh, that's right, he did mention something like that. That explains why she looked surprised at first.
Your husband came here a few days ago with a young woman. They were looking for a house to live in together, and I was the one showing them around. He probably doesn't remember me.
It's typical of him. My husband usually doesn't remember people like shop clerks or others with whom he has a temporary interaction. Unless it's a contract or something, he probably wouldn't remember her.
Actually, your husband and that woman also liked this house. He said if they could somehow manage the down payment, they could afford the payments. Aren't you supposed to be paying the down payment? Excuse me?
Hearing the shocking truth, everything went dark before my eyes. The sound of my shattered trust echoed loudly in my head.
No way, can't be.
I was shocked not only that my husband had an affair, but also that he intended to make me pay the down payment for a better house than he could afford on his own. I had thought all this time since our marriage that we respected each other's time for hobbies, but was he nurturing love with another woman during that time? And was he planning to live with his mistress in this house after buying it? If I paid a third of the price as down payment, as Owen suggested, the monthly mortgage payments would be significantly easier. Maybe once the contract is signed, I might just be discarded.
Calm down, nothing is confirmed yet.
I told myself, taking deep breaths. First things first, I need to investigate my husband.
Thank you. I'm glad you're our agent. Could you help me out a bit?
We quickly exchanged contact information and returned to Owen and his mother. We continued to tour other properties, but I remember nothing. My mind was in turmoil, not knowing whether to trust my husband or if I was being betrayed. Back at home, Owen insisted on buying that first house we saw.
Aria, how much can you contribute for the down payment? A third would be about $300,000. No, I don't have that much. Maybe up to $200,000. Come on, you have your father's inheritance, right? Excuse me?
I was taken aback. My father's inheritance? Why would he bring that up? It made no sense.
It was a rumor at the office. Aria, you inherited a huge fortune from your father. It would be much easier if you paid half.
Ah, indeed, a few years ago after my father passed away, such rumors had amusingly spread around the office. Could that have been his motive?
Even if we decide, I want to take another 1 or 2 looks, thinking of living there. We also need to consider buying new furniture and appliances. Yeah, we'd want to buy new furniture to match that house. Let's go again next weekend. I don't want someone else to get it, so let's bring a deposit just in case.
It seemed in Owen and his mistress's minds that house was already decided. If this is true, I'll gather evidence and bring my husband down to hell. I took a half day off the next day and visited a detective agency that could respond immediately. I suspected something might happen this week. Owen didn't even bother to hide his tracks, and by the next day, I was able to identify his mistress. He had been spending his lunch breaks at her place during his daily sales rounds. On days he didn't go out for drinks after work, he would return to her apartment. The cunning part about Owen was that he spent half the week going out for drinks or meals with me. I felt like crying at my own naivety for believing his words about going out with friends. On Wednesday night, I received a message from Mary.
Your husband has booked for another viewing on Friday and Sunday. Isn't he coming with his mistress on one of those days?
Our agreement was for Sunday. Like last time, he's going first with his mistress. The feeling of betrayal and disbelief made my chest heavy. I felt a mix of unbearable anger and disbelief, leaving a heavy, unsettled feeling in my chest. For now, I informed my father-in-law over the phone that I was considering divorce. It would be better to tell my mother-in-law after everything was decided.
I'm really sorry for my foolish son. If you're planning to confront them on Friday, I'll join you. It's not fair to be two against one. His words were comforting, and I decided to let her father scold her in front of the mistress. Then came the decisive Friday. I met my father-in-law at an old coffee shop near the station after work. As we walked towards the housing complex, Mary called.
He's arrived, but your mother-in-law is with them.
My mother-in-law too?
Yes, she was introduced as the lady's sister just now.
I was speechless. What does this mean? Why are the three of them together? How long had my mother-in-law known about Owen's affair? My mind was swirling with questions. My father-in-law was next to me, holding his head in his hands. I was really glad he came with me today. We quickened our pace towards the property, exchanging glances. Quietly opening the door, my father-in-law and I searched for them. We heard their cheerful voices coming from the living room.
Someday, we'll spend time here with our grandchildren. I'm looking forward to it.
Those words hit me like a punch. Was the real reason Owen wanted a house with more rooms to ensure a space for children? I gathered myself and entered the living room. Though I had braced myself, seeing Owen with another woman was still a shock.
Owen, what is this? Who is this woman?
I couldn't hide my anger as I glared at him. Before Owen could respond, my father-in-law's angry shout filled the room.
Owen! Abigail! What are you two planning? Who is this woman? Speak up!
Owen jumped in surprise, uttering a yelp when he saw me and my father-in-law. My mother-in-law trembled, then collapsed to the floor, looking up at us.
You! And Arya, why are you here?
Owen must not have expected his affair to be discovered. Nor could he have imagined being confronted with both his mother-in-law and mistress present.
Sorry, ma'am, I told your husband that you were here with your family. His sister, right?
Mary's superb acting impressed me even in such a situation. Owen and his mother-in-law just hung their heads, saying nothing.
You were planning to make me pay for this house's down payment and then discard me, weren't you? To get the house in your name and pay off the rest of the mortgage. That woman there, she's Eleanor, the one you were previously thinking of marrying, right? How do you know all this? I hired a detective agency. They recorded your unbelievable conversation with her. We should have had this conversation at home.
I played the recording from a family restaurant conversation for everyone. It contained Owen's despicable words, "Sorry for making you wait 2 years. Once she pays the down payment, I'll tell her I want kids and get a divorce. She's too nice, so she'll probably step aside. I can't let go of my mom, she's my cash cow, but if she becomes too much to handle, I'll put her in a facility." Hearing this, my mother-in-law, who had been sitting on the floor, looked up.
Cash cow? Were you planning to take my part-time earnings once we lived together?
My father-in-law answered for my silent husband.
No, I was paying Owen to take care of you. If you ever ran into financial trouble, he was supposed to help out with the extra $1,000 a month I sent along with the rent. What? I never heard of this, nor received any money. So, you were saving it for me?
Owen began to sweat profusely.
Well, that was...
Wait, the $1,000 you've been giving me for saving up to buy a house.
My father-in-law sighed deeply, deeply disappointed.
So you were the one misusing the money, not your mother.
Shocked, my father-in-law fell silent. In the meantime, I asked my mother-in-law something I had been wondering. When did mother-in-law join forces with the two of them? Recalling the days of daughter-in-law training, it seemed unlikely she had been deceiving me from the start.
Not long ago, Owen told me to cooperate for the sake of a house and grandchildren. I'm sorry, so sorry.
My mother-in-law trembled, seemingly frightened by my father-in-law's gaze.
You, Owen, have been making Arya send you money. I'm fed up with your reckless spending and lack of common sense. I won't show any more mercy. This time it's divorce for sure.
Please don't leave me.
My mother-in-law cried out, looking as if her lifeline had been cut. Ignoring her, my father-in-law confronted Owen. Maybe he knew something like this would happen and came with me.
You turned out to be worse than her. I'm disappointed. I'm cutting ties with you both. I want nothing more to do with you. His angry voice echoed through the new house. I almost felt sorry that our negative energy might linger in this house.
No, Dad, it's a misunderstanding.
Owen tried to make excuses, but I was reaching my limit. Grateful to Mary for tactfully leaving the room, I knew I had to end this debacle quickly.
Enough. When did you start planning all this? I have plenty of evidence of your affair, so don't think you can escape.
I confronted Owen. Then Eleanor, his mistress, who had been watching us with annoyance, smirked and spoke up.
Just tell her. We've been using you for our happy marriage. You're single and rich, right? Since Owen gave you such a nice dream, just pay the down payment, will you? So, my marriage to you was part of your plan? Did you really think Owen would seriously fall for an old woman who can't even have kids? Poor you.
My fists clenched. I couldn't forgive Eleanor, who was smirking as if she was watching from a higher ground. I couldn't stand being ridiculed by such a woman.
You talk about me as if I'm a loser, but are you okay? I'll be claiming alimony from you too. What? I can't pay. Well then, maybe your future husband Owen can.
Eleanor looked at Owen in surprise. I took the opportunity to address Owen.
Owen, I'm divorcing you. I'll be claiming $100,000 in alimony from the two of you, so sadly you'll never be able to buy a house. What? I had a fairly enjoyable marriage, but for you, it was just a waste of time and money. By the way, I've already consulted with our colleagues at the office.
Owen's face turned pale. He probably thought I would quit my job after the divorce.
Wait. We had a good 2 years, right? Please, no alimony.
Owen desperately begged, kneeling down.
Your collection at home might fetch some money.
My husband's expression suddenly turned startled, and he began to apologize.
Please, not that, forgive me.
No matter what Owen did or said, I felt nothing. Eleanor, now on the losing end, pouted. So, I had to say a word or two to Eleanor as well.
You too, Eleanor. It's sad you waited 2 years only to end up paying alimony. Maybe you'll be happy with penniless Owen. If you can. What? What are you going to do?
Eleanor's face turned red as she lunged at Owen. As the two of them started their lovers' quarrel, I had one last thing to say to my mother-in-law. Speaking slowly and loudly as if to a child.
You'll hear from my lawyer about what happens next. Also, the money you've been sending to your mother ends now. From next month, Owen will have to support you.
My father-in-law and I left the arguing trio behind and walked out with a sense of relief. Needless to say, we headed straight to a pub near the station and raised a toast to celebrate. Afterwards, I got the lawyers to claim alimony from Owen and Eleanor, and surprisingly, the divorce was settled smoothly. Owen apologized multiple times, but I couldn't forgive him. The affair, naturally, became a topic at the office, and Owen, feeling uncomfortable, quit his job. I thought Owen and Eleanor would finally get married, but their relationship ended anticlimactically. Eleanor probably didn't want to wait another 2 years. It turned out Eleanor was already seeing someone else. After berating Owen, she left him, only to be dumped by her other partner when he found out about the alimony claim. It really was a case of much ado about nothing, or however you might call it. My mother-in-law, faced with divorce from my father-in-law, couldn't pay the rent anymore and moved into Owen's apartment. My father-in-law had already moved far away and cut off all contact with them. It's uncertain how long my spendthrift mother-in-law and jobless Owen can stay in that apartment. I used the alimony from both of them and my savings to buy a 2-bedroom apartment outright. Of course, a property recommended by Mary's company. With my father's modest inheritance, I can live comfortably even after retiring. For now, I'm not interested in love or marriage, but marriage wasn't as bad as I imagined. So, maybe one day I'll meet a partner who truly loves me and wants to share life with me.